What's going on my fantasy football managers? Welcome to the Blown Coverage Fantasy Football Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm Waiver Wire Queen. In today's episode, we are going to talk about some players you should consider selling high and trading them off of your roster. Some of these players are performing at a high rate right now, but that production is going to start declining because it is productivity that they won't be able to sustain throughout the entire season. And some players are starting to show signs of a decline in their production. And why not trade these players for players who may be able to better help your team going forward? Now, let's talk about some of these players. We're going to kick this thing off with Geno Smith, quarterback with the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith is playing extremely well. I don't think anyone expected Geno Smith to produce the type of numbers statistically that he's been producing so far this season. Yes, he is a player you can actually have on your roster and start sometimes. There are some quarterbacks who you have currently on your roster who aren't playing very well and don't deserve to hold a roster spot. Oh, they damn sure don't deserve to start. And Geno Smith has played well enough to where he deserves to at least be on your roster or starting for you during a bye week. Now, I don't expect him to sustain this production. It has been great if you've been able to pick him up and utilize him and take advantage of what he's been doing. Kudos to you. But now it's time to potentially trade him for a player who you may truly need, because there's no reason for him to be sitting on your bench and you're unable to truly utilize him. So it's time to target a team who may be able to utilize Geno's services while you can acquire a player who's going to be able to help your team in a position you may be weak at. So consider trading Geno Smith right now before his value goes down and you're going to put him back on waivers, right? Yes. So on the season so far, Geno has again been playing out his mind. 157 attempts for 118 completed passes, 1,305 passing yards, 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, playing out his mind. And again, I just simply don't anticipate he's going to keep this type of production for the entire season. And again, you can use him for your bye week, but if you can acquire a player who's going to help your team long term going forward, then you may want to cash in on what Geno Smith is doing. Another player who has some value, but that value is starting to slightly go down, is James Robinson. Yes, James Robinson wasn't even expected to start the season, right? He started the season, came back much earlier than we all expected from an injury, and played very well. We all had high hopes for Travis Etienne, right? Everybody was like, oh, yeah, Travis. And Robinson was like, oh, no. I'm going to make sure that I am able to get on the field, because you don't want to risk losing your time, right? Your position. So Robinson played very well. And you're starting to see some slight decline in his production over the last game or so. And he makes a great asset for you to utilize in the trade. Why not target whoever has Travis Etienne, who thought that Travis was going to be the main guy? Let them have the headache of Travis playing or James playing, and you're starting to see Travis play a little bit more and get more involved. So the second half of the season may be more of Travis and slightly less of James. So target whoever has Travis Etienne or someone who may be able to utilize a running back, and say you're weak at the wide receiver position or tight end position, whatever position you may be weak at. And if you're strong at the running back position and can afford to move on from Robinson before that production declines even more, you need to do so. On the season, 69 carries, 286 yards. He's averaging 4.14 yards per carry, and he has 3 touchdowns. He's involved also in the passing game, 8 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Again, Robinson has probably done more than what we expected. But if you can acquire a player who may be able to help you in another spot that you're weak at, then do so, because you can get some really good value for James Robinson, especially if you are strong at the running back position. Focus on your positions that you are weak at and try to acquire players before that trade deadline comes in your league, which is going to make you better. That is the goal. You don't want to have 12 running backs, but say you can only start 2 or maybe 3, and you're weak at the wide receiver position, and you're trying to determine, who am I starting? Am I starting these 2 running backs or these running backs? And then you leave a running back on the bench who is able to outperform some of the running backs you started. So you may not want that headache. And again, if you are weaker at a position and you can use Robinson as a asset to acquire a better player at, say, the wide receiver position, which is going to make your team stronger long term for the remainder of the season, then do so. Another player you should trade immediately is Clyde EdwardsHelaire, running back with the Chiefs. Let's be clear. I don't know about you guys, but it's looking like a committee to me. Although he was leading it early on, now it's kind of like, well, is it going to be McKinnon? Is it going to be Pacheco? Who is going to be the running back who's going to see the majority of the carries? Week 5, McKinnon had 8. Clyde EdwardsHelaire had 9 carries. It's time to try and move Clyde EdwardsHelaire. If you haven't already done so, then you may want to consider moving him. He's starting to play less snaps. And again, these other 2 running backs are involved in, again, you don't even know which one of those guys are going to be involved from week to week, because week 4, it was Pacheco. Hope I'm saying his name right. And then week 5, it was McKinnon. So it was like, okay, you're thinking that it's going to be Pacheco. And then no, it's McKinnon week 5. So you don't want that headache. I'm sorry. It's a headache that you don't want. And let someone else have that headache. If you can acquire a player who's going to help your team and actually have more opportunities to score fantasy points for you, then you need to do so. During the season so far, solid numbers, but again, playing time kind of going down slightly in favor of other running backs week to week. So we don't want a headache of not knowing when a player is going to perform. Week 5 was just very disappointing for Clyde EdwardsHelaire if you had him, and if you can still move him, you need to do so. 50 carries on the season, 233 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Not bad, because we didn't have these expectations for him going on to start the season. But he has produced early on, so use that to try and acquire someone who is going to have more opportunities, and it's more of a consistent role, because right now it's just inconsistent. Okay, 16 receptions, 137 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Okay, he's involved in the passing game, but we don't care. We want somebody we know is going to be the guy all the time and not taking a backseat to other running backs. We just don't want that headache. Another player you should sell high is David Montgomery, running back with the Bears. I'll be clear, you don't know what's going to happen. I think the main thing is the injuries. Like, always in and out of the lineup over the last few seasons with injuries. They actually love Khalil Herbert. So that is something else to keep in mind. And then the offense just isn't really looking good. Not saying he has the highest value, but if you can get something back for him, because some people just really love running backs, then I would do so, because it's like you never know what's going to happen with the injuries. And then also the fact that they mentioned early on about Herbert being someone that they really love at the running back position, and Montgomery may not be a fit offensive wise for the new offensive scheme. That should kind of scare you if you have David Montgomery. He honestly is the only Bears offensive player I would actually start, because he's a running back. Chances are he may get a goal line touch and get you a touchdown, but I believe he's gonna be touchdown dependent. And again, that offense isn't really moving great. So if he can score some more fantasy points like he did last week, it was the touchdowns that really helped him, right? Got a touchdown. He was involved in the passing game. He had a horrible day on the ground. But again, the offense just really isn't that great. But if you can acquire an asset that's going to help you more than what Montgomery is doing, then do so. 47 carries on the season for 179 yards and 1 touchdown, 9 receptions for 100 yards. That's better than what he's been doing on the ground rushing wise. Okay. And again, the Bears love Herbert. So move on from him if you can. Okay. And another player, I know people are going to say this is crazy, but Curtis Samuel, I talked about him a few weeks ago. He just played out his mind early on. I will say it's not really Curtis who I'm concerned about production wise. It's the quarterback, y'all. It's the damn quarterback. I'm sorry. I don't want any damn wide receiver that is receiving passes from Carson Wentz, because you just never know what's going to happen. You never know if it's going to be a good week or a bad week. It's not Curtis. It's Carson, okay? And why have the headache? And we appreciate how good Curtis has played early on this season. However, it's looking a little bit up and down because of Carson Wentz. If this was another quarterback, I would say yes, keep Curtis, but I feel like it's going to be some inconsistencies, which is why a lot of times I stay away from Terry McLaurin, because I don't trust the quarterback position, and that hurts his production. And it's going to cap his production, his potential. And we want players who, can produce. Look at what happened to Darnell Mooney this season. I don't think anyone expected Darnell Mooney to struggle this much, but it's the damn quarterback. It is what it is. On the season, Samuels has 32 receptions for 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's also sometimes going to receive some carries, not a lot, but a few. But again, they also have McLaurin, and they also have Jahan Dotson once he returns, and they're all going to possibly be involved. I would capitalize on the name Curtis Samuel, because when you think of Curtis Samuel, it's like, oh, he is producing. He's the guy for the Commanders. Even if you feel he is still the guy for the Commanders because he has some type of rapport with Carson Wentz, we simply don't want the headache of not knowing what the hell Carson Wentz is going to do. Is it going to be the week 1 Carson Wentz that show up, or the Carson Wentz over the last 3 weeks? We don't want that Carson Wentz, but that is who is more than likely going to show up. And that's going to hurt Curtis Samuel's production. And also you have to keep in mind, the Commanders are playing horrible. They may end up sitting Carson Wentz, because if it gets later on in the season, right, and he's not playing well, you may want to see what you have in Sam Howell, right? You may want to see if he's your guy before you go into the 2023 NFL draft. So if the Commanders continue to lose, like they may, Carson Wentz may be on the bench because he's not looking good. But there are other aspects of that team that's just not doing well. They're just not playing well overall. But if he continues to struggle with the fumbles, interceptions, he's going to be on the bench. And you may see Taylor Heineke get in there. But we all know that they went and traded for Carson Wentz because they didn't believe in Heineke as the franchise guy. But I don't understand the whole Carson Wentz factor, because what has Carson Wentz truly showed teams over the last few seasons? That he is not the guy, that he may have show some flashes like he did in week 1, right? Week 1, week 2 was just, yes, solid. And remember, week 2, he didn't look good early on in the game. It was later in the game that he started playing well. So you wonder why, like, just draft your quarterback or wait and get a quarterback in the 2023 draft. But they had to make a trade for him. And again, it just hasn't worked, and they don't look good. So again, try to move on from Curtis Samuels, because you can get some really good value for him. You may need a tight end, because there are some tight ends that you thought who may have produced better stats this season, but they simply haven't. So maybe you're struggling at the tight end position, because let's be clear, you can get a Curtis Samuels on waivers who's going to produce similar stats. You simply can. Wide receiver position is deep. So if someone is struggling at the wide receiver position, Curtis Samuels they're going to jump all over it, and you're going to find a player who's going to better help you at a weaker spot. Make sure you leave some comments and let me know your thoughts on my sell high players going into week 6. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We have a lot of great content, which is going to help you throughout the fantasy football season so you can stay ahead of your competition and achieve your ultimate goal. And we all know what the ultimate goal is in fantasy football. I'll see you guys on Saturday. We have a great episode. We're going to do our starts, sits, players that we love going into Sunday. So I'll see you guys on Saturday.
Thanks for listening to the Blown Coverage Fantasy Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Blown Coverage Fantasy Football Podcast.